Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm David Owen. Anyone who's had kids knows there are times when they say or do something that makes you do a double take. Just like the growing pains they experience as their bodies get bigger, their brains experience something similar to that. Couple that with the social stresses and who knows what else, and that student's success might seem questionable. How will you, the parent, understand the difference between normal behaviors and other behaviors that may need to be addressed? Here to help us figure out how to help your student is the Supervisor of Psychological Services for Cobb Schools, Jameika Rice. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, David. Thank you for having me.
Very briefly, tell us a little bit about your personal experience. Where did you grow up, for example?
So I am originally from Kentucky.
Okay.
And I went to the University of Kentucky. So my undergraduate degree is in psychology.
Okay. Now, there are bulldogs that are going to be hearing this and just cringing, but that's okay. Go ahead. Keep going.
The best SEC is Kentucky.
Ooh.
Wildcats are Wildcat country. Sorry. So
throwing shade within the first 1 minute of the podcast. That's great.
So my bachelor's is in psychology, and then my undergraduate work was at the University of Kentucky as well. Uh-huh. I have a master's in education, and then educational specialist degree in school psychology.
Okay, so you're well prepared.
Definitely. For school psychologists, entry level is educational specialist degree, and then some of our psychologists on staff have doctoral degrees.
How long have you been with Cobb Schools?
This is going on my 5th year.
Okay, all right. So we haven't run you off that quickly then.
Not yet.
That's good. All right. So what is a school psychologist? I know this is kind of a rudimentary question, but a lot of people, when they hear the term school psychologist, they equate it with school counselor. Totally different, well, not totally different things, but you do distinctly different things. Tell us about those differences, if you will.
You are correct. Most people are not clear as to what a school psychologist does. They are two totally different fields. School psychologist is a very specialized field, so we do a lot of evaluating students to determine whether or not they qualify for special education services.
Okay.
So we are experts in looking at learning and also behavioral concerns. So I think that's the biggest difference. Mm-hmm. We also can do consultation. We can do, and when I say consultation, that is, meeting with teachers and parents when there's concerns and offering recommendations and interventions to help, like, for example, with classroom management, if they have, students that are having conflicts, like friendship, like doing friendship groups. Mm-hmm. And we can also collaborate with counselors as well. Some of our school psychologists often run small group counseling groups with some counselors. But I think the biggest distinction is the fact that we evaluate. So we do cognitive, like IQ test, academic test. We do social emotional testing. So we evaluate students, working with students that may have autism, that may have ADHD, that may have learning problems, so a variety of disabilities.
So would it be fair to say that you are using a more clinical approach to assessing behaviors and dealing with them than maybe a counselor would be? Not to diminish the role of counselors,
no,
but
very important work that counselors do.
It's a different level of assessment.
It's a different level of assessment, and I think the other distinction too is, like, what's the difference between a school psychologist and a psychologist, a private psychologist? Uh-huh. So we don't make diagnoses, but we do help to determine whether or not a child is eligible for special education services if they have a disability. So the biggest difference is the evaluation or assessment piece.
Okay.
I think that's the biggest difference between a school psychologist and counselors, is that we do that piece, that we are the only ones in the school system that are qualified to administer those IQ tests and the academic testing and social emotional testing. Mm-hmm. But we work very closely closely with the school teams because the counselors also work with helping the teams to manage the information when there are concerns, when parents or teachers have concerns about a student, maybe their behavior or academic. The counselors are usually the ones that manage that process, kind of like the case managers over our response to intervention teams.
Okay.
So they will be the ones a lot of time to coordinate and set up those meetings, and so and consult with the school psychologist to make sure that the school psychologist is involved. So we work very closely, like, two heads are definitely better than one, in trying to come up with those interventions and recommendations for parents, especially, with the behavioral health, because I think that, school psychologists and counselors, are the experts in the schools when it comes to those mental health needs and challenges.
Would it be fair to say that a counselor is primarily concerned with helping a student understand their situation, how to relate to others, etc., whereas a school psychologist is helping the schools understand how to help the student? Is that oversimplifying it?
I don't know if it's oversimplifying. I think that's a good way to put it. It is a team approach, and I think the biggest piece truly is the assessment piece.
Yeah.
And so I would say that school psychologists, I always say sometimes they're the puzzle makers. So they take the pieces of the puzzle, all these different pieces, which may be from the teacher, from direct observation with the student, from parent concerns, administrators, even from the counselor's concerns. And we put it all together and help the team to try to come up with some interventions and recommendations on how we can support the students' learning.
Sure. So if you understand the student better as a team,
Yes.
you can help the student reach that
Yes.
success level. Okay. Well, that helps me. I don't know if it helps any listeners out there, but hopefully it does. Do you evaluate every student that comes through the door, or what initiates the process, I guess really is the question? Because we know you can't interview and assess. You don't need to assess every student.
Right. So no, we do not evaluate all the students. We have over 107,000 students in Cobb. So
Busy lady.
yeah, definitely. So currently we have 53 school psychologists, and all of our school psychologists serve they have either 2 or 3 buildings.
Okay.
And so whenever there's a concern about either a student's learning or their behavior, it is brought to what we call an RTI team, or response to intervention team. So we meet as a team to try to determine, okay, so what's going on with the student, what are the concerns, and where do we need to go? So do we need, what types of interventions or what kind of supports can we put in place in the classroom? And it's usually several steps down the line where we would talk about an evaluation. So sometimes an evaluation may occur because the team has put in a lot of different supports and the student is still having difficulties either academically or behaviorally or both. Or the parent may come to the school and say, hey, I have concerns. My student, I have concerns about maybe attentional concerns or learning concerns or behavioral concerns. I would like my child evaluated. Can you assist me? Can you help? So to answer your question, the evaluations usually stem from either a parent request or from a school team request.
Based on whoever raises the concern.
Right. Based on concerns that they have, or as you stated, red flags, or, concerns that they have that the student is not performing where expected.
So would your RTI team most likely see student clients, I guess you'd call them, in the elementary and earlier years, or would you typically see them in the late years, or there is no typical, it just happens when it happens?
We evaluate elementary, middle, and high. Okay. And we definitely probably have the bulk of our evaluations at the elementary school level, but we still do have evaluations at the middle and the high. Students that are not receiving services are what we call initial evaluations. So those are students where there's concerns, but they're not currently receiving services.
Right.
But then our psychologists are also involved for students that are already receiving services, but we want updated information,
Sure.
or we need updated information to continue continue to support and help that student. So we get a lot more of those at the middle and high school level.
Okay. Well, and that's basically just touching base again. Are these interventions we've come up with helping?
We're also looking at eligibility. So we're looking to see if the student is eligible under a specific special education category.
Okay.
So it's really, I'm trying to make it simple, but it really is complex in a little bit.
It's government. It's government forms. It's all that.
Well,
right?
And it's, because that helps us to be able to determine, the best way to provide supports and services. So it is definitely led by Georgia state law.
And you guys work a lot with the special ed department.
We do work closely with special education just to ensure that we are in compliance and that we are following the law and making sure, because there are specific procedures that we have to adhere to as well.
The middle school parents, or more appropriately, parents of middle schoolers, the middle school brain is a unique thing. Mm-hmm. Would you not agree with that?
Yes.
Professional assessment.
I do agree, and they are my favorite because they are so unique.
For the challenge? Well, you don't have to answer that. But how should parents discern between a typical middle schooler brain versus a child who really is struggling and needs some help, needs some intervention, maybe needs an assessment? Are there any tips that you could provide parents who are concerned about their student?
I think sometimes, it's hard to know, and a lot of times we will get parents who will come, to the school and say, I want my child evaluated because they don't know, what's typical and what's not typical,
right?
Especially if they only have one child, and everybody's different.
Yeah.
And so I would say that, bringing that information to the school team and having that meeting, because a lot of times we have the meeting and we discuss and we will, ask parents different questions, especially, to help them to be able to to determine what's typical and what's not. So it's more so, how long have you seen these concerns? How severe, like how often do you see the concerns?
Mm-hmm.
Like just getting them to give you more information.
Like, is it a temporary thing
right.
or is this a long term?
And also background, so that background history, does the child have, any medical diagnosis? Do they have any, prior concerns where maybe they may already be seeing, a doctor or a counselor or a psychologist?
Yeah.
So just trying to get that background information to determine, the frequency, how frequent and how severe those concerns are, helps us to be able to let the parent, to help the team to determine whether or not it's typical or if it's something that's, atypical and that would require more support. We can also make recommendations, and the recommendations may not be specific to, having an actual evaluation, but more so things that can be done at home and things that can be done at school as well.
Yeah, so it's not every evaluated student rises to the level of, you need to get this child into therapy. When you make recommendations to parents for things they might be able to do to help their student at home, what typical or what common things might you? So
one thing is repetition. So if a student is having difficulty with reading, like learning how, for example, learning their letters, we might make recommendations for them, things that they can do at home to help support their student. For example, using shaving cream to have them trace the letters in the shaving cream, using those little magnetic letters and letting the student take the letters and rearrange them, to make words or identify. So fun things that they can do. And that's just one example specific to reading. Uh-huh. It really depends on what the concerns are because, like I said, when we're looking at academics, we're talking about all areas of academics, basic reading fluency, like your reading speed, your written expression, spelling, math, reasoning, basic math. So we're talking about all of those. We assess all those areas.
It's broad, to say the least,
yes.
Right?
And so it really depends. So it really depends on what the concern is with, the academics, what types of recommendations. But usually it'll be fun things like that because parents will say, well, what can I do at home? Mm-hmm. Because at school, the teachers, they have huge toolboxes. So they already have a lot of different tools and things that they're using. And sometimes, you can bring in, we'll consult with other teachers in that grade level and they'll give us, pointers and things for the teachers to try. And so we just really try to look at whatever the deficit area is and find ways to support it. And sometimes, like in innovative or fun ways, like I said, repetition is all about, that repetition, and that really oftentimes will help the student to improve in that area.
And not just repetition, but shaving cream.
Shaving cream.
Yeah,
it has to be shaving cream. Well, that's just one fun one that came, because I personally feel that learning should be fun. Learning is fun. Reading is one of my favorite things to do. So whenever, a student's like, I don't like to read, I'm like, are you serious? You can go into a whole different world. Yeah. So I think sometimes, because the other thing is motivation, so for us as school psychologists, we acknowledge that once these students have had, an extended period of deficit, then the motivation sometimes is not as high. So we're trying to definitely come up with innovative strategies to help improve that motivation as well.
Yeah, motivation in any teenager is
a
real challenge, right? So as we're recording this, we're getting close to the end of the first half of the year, and the Thanksgiving and holiday season is coming up really fast. What can parents do to help their student push through for a successful finish? Are there any big picture things that you would recommend for their student?
I would say the biggest thing is communicating with your child's teacher. If you do have any concerns, and just monitoring, your students' progress. Definitely, as we are going on break, a lot of times our students lose some of that structure. And so I would say structure is, trying to maintain some level of structure, because the biggest thing we see is that after breaks, like getting students in transition back, especially our younger students and even our older students, they may check out a little bit. So trying to have some of that structure still while they're on break. They can have fun, but maintaining structure, bedtime. Because I'll tell you one thing that I did learn, if you miss sleep, you can't make it up.
Yeah.
And being able to function, being able to, to attend has a lot to do with your sleep. So making sure that they're still getting sleep. I know they want to stay up and they want to play video games and watch TV, but making sure they still get that structure, because it will really help transition them back. Yeah. And so that we can keep them, on a high and motivated to succeed. So I would say, and definitely if you do have concerns, going to the school, having conversations with the teacher, knowing that school psychologists do exist, and that we are there, that we're more at the tail end. There's so many, that's what I was trying to get to. Yeah. There's so many other pieces that we want to exhaust before we actually got to the point of an evaluation. Yeah. But you can still consult with the school psychologist. You can consult with that school team, for different specific pointers to help your child, depending on, what the deficit area is. But I would definitely say one of the things I would say is just, trying to maintain some type of structure and consistency to help them transition, and just, communicating with them, asking them, so what did you learn today? You will be very surprised, having the student reframe and teach you by telling you what they did, which I do know high schoolers, they'll say, the conversation will be like, it was school, and they don't want to talk about it. But with our younger students, asking them questions about their day, because that also helps them, to teach you that information, and it helps to reiterate once again, so that they can, be able to better recall what they learned at school, and that the information will truly sink in. So.
Well, when it comes to dealing with minds, whether it's a child or an adult, fully understanding what's going on usually is not a quick fix thing, and certainly more than we can cover in just one podcast episode. We could go on and on, but you have definitely shed some light on some key things, and most importantly, you've helped us better understand your department's role in leading the students to success. Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming by and taking the time here.
Thank you.
So, folks, if you're a parent out there and you want to know more about what Psychological Services does in Cobb schools, as always, check the show notes for links that will help you do that. And, of course, follow, like, and subscribe so that you can be aware of when the next podcast is released. You can also leave us a review using the link in the show notes. So thank you for listening to The Inside Scoop, a podcast produced by the Cobb County School District.